when you're talking about animals go extinct and save them, that's how you do it, not hunting them.
Yes, and it is true that overhunting has been a major cause of animal extinction throughout the years, but not so much today. The polar bear example in my book is a classic case. Very few people know that in 1973, due to wildlife biologists warning the Arctic countries that the polar bears were declining in population due to hunting, to get a rug for your fireplace. Lots of people were going up there. It was easy to fly up then in the 70s, whereas it had been more difficult in past years. And you could hire an Inuit guide to take you to kill a polar bear or two. And this had no restrictions. It was open.
Oh.
And so in 1973, all of the polar nations, including Denmark, because you have a lot of polar bears on Greenland, all these countries signed a treaty to end the unrestricted hunting of polar bears. And since that time, unbeknown to most of the world population because of the false information spread by Greenpeace and other groups, the polar bear population has increased from somewhere around 8 to 10,000 to somewhere around 20 to 40,000 today, because the hunting was ended. There is no possibility that the polar bear will become extinct anytime soon, because its population is growing, and this is not being told.
We all seen that footage of that starving polar bears who like kind of started all that discussion about the polar bears and sea ice and all that.
That's right, but what most people don't realize is that the main cause of death for polar bears is starving to death. That's because they have no predators. They are a top predator. So there's nothing that kills polar bears and eats them. So when they get really old, I mean, there are no nursing homes for old polar bears. They have to die in the wild naturally. And so it's easy to find a starving polar bear in a population of 30,000, because some are dying every day, no doubt. And they are dying because they have reached the end of their life, like people do too. Some people forget that every living thing is going to die and be replaced, hopefully be replaced by new living things. And one of my favorite concepts, which very few people stop to think, is that every living thing, all the billions of living insects and fish and trees and people and birds and forests on this earth, every one, represents a continuous, successful reproduction since the beginning of life. If the chain is broken, the next one doesn't come.
No.
So people need to think of that. We are on a time front of 4 billion or 3.5 billion years since life first existed. And life has continually branched like a tree, branching and branching and branching ever since then. And all of us go back to that beginning, or we wouldn't be here. And this is even though there have been 5 major extinctions through either asteroids striking the Earth or volcanoes darkening the skies, both by the same mechanism of sending vast amounts of material into the stratosphere, where it blocks out the sun and prevents photosynthesis in the plants, which destroys the food chain for all of life. And these extinctions have occurred 5 times in just the last 500 million years. Before that, everything was in the ocean and microscopic, so we don't know really about the extinctions back then. But in the last 500 million years, there has been on average 1 mass extinction every 100 million years. The last one being 65 million years ago, when the dinosaurs went extinct, that one being from an asteroid contact. But we don't know what happened with the previous ones. They're too far back to have a perfect record. And so it could have been an asteroid, and it could have been massive volcano activity. but we don't know. But still, even though over 90% of all the species that ever lived are already extinct, biodiversity is higher in this era, in this last few million years, than it ever has been in the history of life. National Geographic, February 1999, has a wonderful graph showing this to be true. And whereas National Geographic has gone off on some terrible informations telling people that the polar bears are dying from climate change, etc., this one graph is worth seeing, which is in my book, reproduced in my book, to show people that biodiversity has continued to rise ever since life began.